The bass rolled through the upscale cocktail lounge in downtown Atlanta, vibrating beneath Naomi Pierce's heels as she tugged at the ridiculous hot pink sash crossing her chest. Bridesmaid Squad shimmered in glittery letters that caught every flash of light in the room. She tried to straighten it for the third time, already resigned to the fact that no amount of adjusting would make it look dignified. Across from her, her best friend Ariana Colther, bride-to-be, wore a rhinestone tiara crowned with tiny plastic champagne bottles dangling from springs. Every time Ariana laughed, they bounced, clinking softly, and somehow she wore the whole thing with such genuine joy that Naomi couldn't help smiling. "Naomi, stop hiding behind that drink and dance with us," Ariana shouted over the music, cheeks flushed with happiness and, if Naomi had to guess, at least one cocktail too many. "I'm supervising," Naomi called back, lifting her glass of white wine in mock authority. "Somebody has to make sure you don't end up dancing on the tables." "That's literally the point of a bachelorette party," Keisha chimed in, grabbing Naomi's wrist and tugging her toward the crowded dance floor where their group had claimed a corner. Naomi laughed despite herself and let Keisha pull her in. At 32, she'd been to enough bachelorette parties to know exactly how the night usually went to many drinks. Bad dancing, inside jokes shouted over music that was far too loud, but this one felt different. Ariana wasn't just a friend. She'd been Naomi's closest confidant since college, the sister she'd chosen. Seeing her this happy, this sure, filled Naomi's chest with warmth and, if she was honest, stirred a quiet question she quickly pushed aside. When would it be her turn? She dismissed the thought as soon as it surfaced. Her life was full enough running a contemporary art gallery in Midtown, curating shows that elevated emerging black artists and gave them the spotlight they deserved. Romance could wait. It always had. After 3 back-to-back songs left her breathless and slightly overheated, Naomi raised her hands in surrender. "I need another drink." She slipped away toward the bar, grateful for the cooler air and relative calm. She had just leaned against the marble counter when she felt it, a shift, subtle but undeniable. A presence at her back, warm and confident, altering the space around her as if the air itself had changed. "You have the most captivating smile in this entire place." The voice was deep, smooth-edged, with an assurance that flirted dangerously close to arrogance. Naomi turned slowly, already preparing a polite but firm dismissal. And then she froze. The man beside her was striking in a way that felt almost unfair. Tall, broad-shouldered, his charcoal gray shirt fit him like it had been tailored specifically for his frame. His skin was a rich, even brown, his hair cut clean and sharp, and his eyes intense dark and focused held her attention longer than she intended. He looked to be in his late 30s, and everything about him radiated success and self-assurance. "Do you use that line often?" Naomi asked. Finding her composure at last, his mouth curved into a smile that managed to be charming and infuriating at the same time. "Only when I mean it." He extended his hand without hesitation. "Zion Holt." Naomi glanced at his hand for a brief moment before taking it. His grip was warm and steady. "Naomi, just Naomi, for now." Her laugh came easily, surprising her, and it transformed his expression from merely handsome to genuinely magnetic. "Fair enough," he said. "Can I buy you a drink?" "I'm at a bachelorette party," Naomi replied, gesturing toward her friends, who were now attempting something that resembled synchronized choreography. "I'm not here to meet men." "Convenient," he said, leaning casually against the bar. "I'm not here to meet women. But sometimes fate has other plans." "Fate," Naomi echoed, skepticism coloring her tone. "That's quite the assumption." "Call it what you want," Zion said calmly. "I saw you from across the room, and I needed to talk to you." There was something disarming about his directness. Most men danced around their intentions, but Zion laid his out plainly, without apology. Against her better judgment, Naomi felt herself intrigued. "So what do you do, Zion Holt?" she asked as the bartender set down her wine. "I invest in technology companies," he replied. "Help them grow, scale, reach their potential." "Sounds important," It pays the bills, he said with a self-aware smile. What about you? I manage an art gallery, contemporary black art, mostly, downtown. His eyes brightened instantly. Pierce Gallery. Naomi blinked. You know it. I was there last month for the Rivers exhibit, he said. The way you curated that space telling a story, just through placement it, was brilliant. You noticed the curation, she said. Genuinely surprised, I always notice when someone is exceptional at what they do. Heat crept up her neck. This man was dangerous, too attentive, too perceptive. She should walk away, return to Ariana and the chaos of the dance floor. Instead, she found herself staying. They talked about art and technology, discovering unexpected common ground. Zion told her about studying computer science with a minor in art history, a combination that fascinated her. He really listened, asking thoughtful questions. Instead of waiting for his turn to speak. 30 minutes passed like 3. I should get back, Naomi said reluctantly, glancing at her friends. Ariana was giving her an exaggerated thumbs up, mouthing something that looked suspiciously like go for it. I understand, Zion said, straightening. But before you go, there's something I need to do. What's that? He stepped closer. Naomi caught the scent of his cologne, subtle, expensive. His hand lifted, warm against her cheek, and before she could fully process what was happening, his lips brushed hers. The kiss was brief, barely more than a touch, but it sent a jolt of electricity through her entire body. For one suspended moment, the world fell away. Then reality snapped back. Naomi stepped back sharply, her hand moving on instinct. The slap echoed through the space, sharp and unmistakable. Conversations stalled. Heads turned. Zion touched his cheek. Shock written across his face along with something else. Admiration, maybe. That was completely inappropriate, Naomi said, her voice trembling with adrenaline and anger. You're right, he said immediately. That was impulsive. I apologize. Apology not accepted. She grabbed her purse. You don't get to kiss women without permission. You're absolutely right, he said, rubbing his cheek. Though I have to say you've got impressive aim. This isn't funny. I'm not laughing, Zion replied seriously. I'm genuinely sorry, Naomi, but I'm not sorry I met you. She hesitated, thrown by the sincerity in his eyes. Goodbye, Zion Holt, she said finally, turning away. Wait. He caught her wrist gently, releasing it the moment she looked down. Let me see you again, properly, dinner. Let me prove I'm not always this much of an idiot. Why would I agree to that? Because despite everything, he said quietly, you felt something too. She wanted to deny it. She couldn't. One dinner, Naomi said at last. And if you try anything without asking, I promise I won't miss next time. His smile was radiant. Deal. As she typed her number into his phone, Ariana appeared beside her, eyes wide. Did that fine man just kiss you and get slapped? Yes, Naomi muttered. And apparently, I gave him my number anyway. Ariana squeezed her arm. Or maybe you just found something interesting. Naomi watched Zion walk away, still touching his cheek, and wondered what she'd just set in motion. All she knew was that her carefully ordered life had been There was no going back. The restaurant Zion chose for their first official date was the kind of place Naomi usually only saw featured in glossy Atlanta lifestyle magazines. Perched on the top floor of a restored historic building in Midtown, it overlooked the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows that glittered with reflected light. The entire space breathed understated luxury, soft jazz humming in the background. Candlelight flickering across crisp white tablecloths. Servers moving with quiet precision. There were no prices on the menu. Just elegant descriptions and an unspoken understanding that this was not a place you visited casually. Naomi smoothed the front of her emerald green dress as the host led her through the dining room. She had agonized over what to wear, standing in her closet for nearly an hour before finally calling Ariana in a mild panic. Between the two of them, they'd raided closets, debated shoes, dismissed outfits that felt too stiff or too uncertain, until Naomi finally settled on this one classic, fitted, confident without trying too hard. Even now, her nerves fluttered as she followed the host. Aware of every step, Zion stood the moment he saw her. The look on his face erased every doubt she'd had. For a heartbeat, he simply stared, something open and unguarded crossing his features before he caught himself. "You look absolutely stunning," he said, and this time there was nothing rehearsed or smooth about it. It sounded honest, almost reverent. "Thank you," Naomi replied, taking her seat and forcing herself not to gape at the view beyond the glass. "This place is incredible." "I wanted somewhere special," Zion said, settling across from her. "Something to make up for my abysmal first impression." "You mean the unsolicited kiss?" she asked lightly. Among other things, he admitted, that crooked smile making her pulse jump. "I'm hoping to prove I have some redeeming qualities." Over the next 2 hours, he did exactly that. The conversation flowed effortlessly, slipping from art to technology to childhood dreams and adult realities without awkward pauses or forced transitions. Zion told her about growing up in Portland with a single mother who worked 3 jobs, about scholarships and late nights, about building his first company out of a cramped college dorm room. "I sold it 8 years ago," he said, swirling his wine. "Enough to pay off my mother's mortgage and start my investment firm. She still thinks I should have gone to medical school." Naomi laughed softly. "Mothers always think we should be doctors. Mine wanted law school. When I told her I wanted to work in art, she didn't speak to me for a month." "But you did it anyway," Zion said. "I did." Naomi smiled, remembering, "My grandmother left me a small inheritance. Enough for 1 year of living expenses. I figured if I couldn't make it work in 12 months, I'd go back to grad school." "And clearly," he said, leaning forward with genuine interest, "you made it work. Pierce Gallery is one of the most respected spaces for emerging black artists in the Southeast. You did your homework." "I like to know about the people who interest me," he replied. His tone steady but intense, something about the way he said it sent warmth curling through her chest. Zion wasn't distracted or half present. When he looked at her, it was like the rest of the room ceased to exist. It was thrilling and, if she was honest, slightly overwhelming. When dinner ended, Zion walked her toward the exit, where a sleek black car waited at the curb. The driver, a quiet man with a composed presence, stepped out and opened the door. "You have a driver?" Naomi asked, unable to hide her surprise. "It's practical," Zion said, a touch sheepish. "I work during commutes." She studied him for a moment. "It's different from my world." "Our worlds aren't that different," he replied calmly. "I just have more zeros in my bank account." Naomi wasn't entirely convinced, but she didn't say it. As the weeks passed, she began to realize that difference ran deeper than money. 3 days after their date, Naomi was unlocking the gallery when her phone erupted with notifications, texts, missed calls, social media alerts, far more than usual. Confused, she opened the first message Ariana had sent. "You might want to see this." The headline made her stomach drop. "Tech billionaire. Zion Holt steps out with mystery woman." The photo showed them leaving the restaurant, Zion's hand resting at the small of her back, both of them smiling. It was a beautiful picture, and seeing it splashed across a gossip site made her feel exposed in a way she wasn't prepared for. She scrolled, dread tightening in her chest. They'd identified her, named the gallery, estimated her income. The comments were brutal. "She's pretty, but ordinary for someone like him. Gold digger alert. Give it 3 months, Naomi." Closed the browser with shaking hands. Her phone rang almost immediately. "Naomi." "I saw the article," Zion said, his voice tight. "I'm so sorry. I should have warned you." "You knew this could happen," she replied, sharper than she intended. "The paparazzi follow me sometimes," he admitted, "especially to places like that. I thought we'd be okay. I should have been more careful." "They know where I work," Naomi said quietly. "They published my salary. I'll have my lawyers send cease and desist letters," he said quickly. "This is an invasion of privacy. Will that stop them?" His silence answered her. Over the next month, Naomi learned how to move through Zion's world, the constant awareness of cameras, the whispers that followed them into rooms, the way conversations paused when they arrived. Zion tried to shield her, but he couldn't be everywhere. His work demands grew heavier as he entered the final stages of a major acquisition. Their 5th date was interrupted by urgent phone calls. The 6th was rescheduled. By the 7th, Naomi was starting to recognize the pattern. "I'm sorry," Zion said again, one evening, slipping his phone into his pocket after a long call. The merger's in a critical phase. "I understand," Naomi replied than she did, intellectually. Emotionally, she was beginning to feel like an afterthought. Navigating Zion, Holt's world quickly became a lesson Naomi never asked to learn. Every outing carried an undercurrent of awareness she couldn't turn off. The sense that eyes might be watching, lenses might be trained in their direction, stories already forming before a single word was spoken. When they walked into restaurants together, conversations sometimes dipped, voices lowering just enough to notice before rising again. Strangers smiled too knowingly, others stared outright. Naomi learned to keep her posture steady, her expression calm. Even when her stomach tightened, Zion noticed it all. "I'm sorry," he said more than once, his hand warm at the small of her back as they moved through crowded spaces. "I forget how overwhelming this can be." "It's not your fault," Naomi replied, because she wanted to believe that was true. And maybe, in some ways, it was. But his life didn't slow down to accommodate her discomfort. If anything, it accelerated. Zion was in the middle of a massive acquisition, one that seemed to demand every ounce of his attention. Meetings ran long. Calls came at all hours. His phone buzzed constantly, vibrating against tabletops, lighting up screens during moments that had once felt private. Naomi tried to be patient, reminding herself that ambition was part of what had drawn her to him in the first place. That their 5th date ended with Zion stepping outside to take 3 urgent calls in a row. Their 6th date was rescheduled, then twice each time, accompanied by sincere apologies and promises to make it up to her by the 7th. Naomi felt the shift settle into her bones. "I'm really sorry," Zion said that night, sliding his phone into his pocket after 15 minutes of discussion about valuations and board expectations. "This merger is in a critical phase." "I understand," Naomi said again, and this time the words tasted thin. She did understand. She understood deadlines and pressure, late nights and responsibility. Running a gallery wasn't easy either. But understanding didn't stop the quiet ache that followed her home afterward. Didn't stop the growing sense that she was fitting herself into the cracks of his schedule instead of standing at its center. The real breaking point came at a charity gala Zion invited her to attend. Naomi spent nearly a week's salary on a dress she hoped would help her blend into his world, a sleek black gown that felt elegant without screaming for attention. She spent hours getting ready, studying her reflection, reminding herself that she belonged wherever she chose to stand. Still, the moment she stepped into the ballroom, the scale of it all hit her. The room glittered with excess. Women draped in designer gowns that likely cost more than Naomi's monthly rent. Diamonds flashing under the lights, their laughter polished and effortless. Men clustered in tailored suits, talking about private jets, island properties, and summer homes in places Naomi had only seen in magazines. Naomi smiled, nodded, contributed where she could, feeling acutely aware of every difference she hadn't known how to name before. Zion was pulled away almost immediately by business associates. 5 minutes, he promised, pressing a quick kiss to her cheek. "I'll be right back." 30 minutes later, Naomi stood alone at the bar, nursing a glass of champagne and fighting the urge to shrink into herself. "You must be Naomi." The voice was smooth, feminine and sharpened with barely concealed disdain. Naomi turned to find a stunning woman assessing her with cool precision. She was blonde, statuesque, dressed in white silk that draped her like armor. Diamonds sparkled at her throat and ears, catching the light with every small movement. "I'm Victoria Sterling," the woman said, extending a manicured hand. Zion's ex. Naomi had heard the name. Everyone had. Heiress to a hotel empire, former model, fixture on society pages. The woman Zion had dated for 2 years before their very public breakup. "Nice to meet you," Naomi said, her grip steady despite the tension curling in her chest. Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I have to admit, you're not his usual type." "I wasn't aware he had one," Naomi replied calmly. Victoria sipped her champagne. "Zion usually dates women who understand his lifestyle. Women who've been photographed since childhood, who know how to manage the pressure." Her gaze swept Naomi from head to toe. "No offense, but you look overwhelmed." "I'm fine," Naomi said. "Are you?" Victoria's eyes sharpened. "Because the blogs are having a field day. They're calling you his charity project. Some are even running polls on how long you'll last." Each word landed like a blow, but Naomi kept her face composed. "People talk." "True," Victoria said, leaning closer. "But here's some advice from someone who knows. This world eats people like you alive. You'll think he'll choose you, that love will be enough. But Zion Holt is married to his work. His empire comes first. Always. That's his choice," Naomi said softly. "Is it?" Victoria straightened, satisfaction flickering across her expression. "Or will it be yours, when you finally realize you'll always come second?" She turned to leave. "Enjoy the evening. Try not to look so lost, it excites the photographers." When Zion finally returned, full of apologies and explanations about investors and timing, Naomi smiled and said nothing. But Victoria's words echoed relentlessly, settling into the spaces Naomi had tried so hard to ignore. On the drive home, Zion glanced over at her. "You're quiet. What's wrong?" "Nothing," Naomi said. "I'm just tired." "Naomi," he said gently, "talk to me." She looked at him then, this brilliant, driven man who made her heart race and her world tilt. "Do you really think this can work?" Zion frowned. "What kind of question is that?" "An honest one," she replied. "Your world and mine, they're so different." He reached for her hand, lifting it to his lips. "I don't care about that." "I care about you. But your work," Naomi said quietly. "The travel, the meetings. Where do I fit?" "Everywhere," he said firmly. "This chaos, it's temporary. The merger closes next week. After that, I'm all yours." Naomi wanted to believe him, she really did, but as the weeks continued, the pattern didn't change. Promises were made and broken. Dates were rescheduled. Moments were interrupted. Zion was always apologetic, always explaining, always convinced the next milestone would bring relief, and slowly, without realizing it at first, Naomi began to disappear into the background of his life. The doubts Naomi had been trying to silence grew louder with each passing day. At first, she told herself she was overthinking, that every relationship had an adjustment period, that Zion's schedule would settle once the acquisition closed. She repeated those reassurances like a quiet mantra while continuing to show up smiling through interruptions, accepting apologies, rearranging her time to fit into the narrow windows he offered. But understanding only went so far. Zion's work didn't just demand his attention, it consumed it. Phone calls came during dinners, during quiet moments, during the rare evenings they spent alone. Meetings ran late, flights were booked last minute. Plans were tentative at best. Naomi began to recognize the familiar rhythm of disappointment, even before it arrived. "I promise I'll make it up to you," Zion said more than once, sincerity written across his face, and she believed he meant it. The charity gala had cracked something open inside her, and now she couldn't unsee it. The way she waited while his life moved at full speed. The way she adjusted while he remained unchanged. Even when they were together, part of him seemed elsewhere, mentally calculating numbers and timelines, juggling responsibilities she could never quite reach. The final straw came on a rainy Tuesday evening in November. Naomi had spent the entire day at the gallery preparing for the biggest exhibition of the year. Months of careful curation had led to this momentous showcase of emerging black artists whose work challenged, inspired, and demanded to be seen. The opening was 3 days away. By evening, her feet ached, her shoulders were tight. But pride filled her chest as she stepped back to take it all in. Zion had promised to come. She'd texted him the address, confirmed the time twice. This mattered to her, and he knew it. As the hours passed, the gallery emptied. Assistants packed up and left. The city outside darkened, rain streaking down the tall windows. Naomi checked her phone again. Nothing. At 8 o'clock, her screen finally lit up. So sorry. Emergency board meeting in San Francisco. Flying out now. I'll make it up to you this weekend. Promise. Naomi stared at the message. The glow of the screen harsh against the quiet of the empty gallery. She could already hear the future excuses forming. Another meeting. Another delay. Another promise postponed. She sank to the polished floor. Her back against the wall, surrounded by art that suddenly felt hollow. And for the first time, she stopped lying to herself. She was in love with Zion. Completely, painfully. And it was breaking her. The constant cancellations. The way she always came second. The nights she spent staring at her phone, waiting for messages that came less and less often. She'd started skipping meals without noticing, losing sleep, her thoughts looping endlessly around a man who rarely seemed fully present. Ariana had noticed. Baby, those dark circles aren't cute, her friend had said gently over coffee days earlier. Being busy isn't an excuse for making you feel invisible. Naomi had defended him then. Said he was a good man. Said he was just overwhelmed. Now, alone in her gallery, she knew Ariana had been right. 3 days later, when Zion returned from San Francisco, Naomi invited him to her apartment. He arrived carrying flowers and apologies. His familiar routine already in motion. I know I missed the setup, he began. We need to talk. Naomi said quietly. Something in her voice stopped him cold. I can't do this anymore, she continued. The words trembling, despite all her rehearsing. I can't live like this, Zion's brow furrowed. Do what you I love you, Naomi said, the confession tearing through her. I'm completely in love with you. And that's the problem. Relief lit his face. Naomi, I love you too. I've been waiting to say it. Then why do I feel so alone? She whispered. Why do your meetings matter more than my life? He reached for her hands. This is temporary. Once this deal closes, it never ends, Naomi said softly. And I can't keep waiting for a version of you that never arrives. Zion stared at her. Realization dawning too late. I need to choose myself, she continued, her voice steady now. Before, there's nothing left of me. The pain in his eyes nearly shattered her resolve. Please, he said. I can change. I know you mean that, Naomi replied. But meaning it isn't enough. She stepped back. Please go. He hesitated, then nodded, the weight of her words settling in his posture. I love you, he said at the door. That's the tragedy, Naomi whispered. It counts for everything, and still isn't enough. When the door closed behind him, Naomi slid to the floor and let herself cry. The next 5 days passed in a blur Naomi could barely make sense of. She buried herself in work, arriving at the gallery before sunrise and leaving long after the city had gone quiet. 16-hour days became the norm. She moved from task to task on pure momentum, adjusting lighting, reviewing installations, coordinating with artists, doing everything she could to avoid the stillness that followed when she stopped. The exhibition opened to critical acclaim. Collectors praised her vision. Reviewers called the curation bold and necessary. Cameras flashed. Compliments poured in. Naomi smiled through all of it and felt absolutely nothing. Zion called 17 times. She didn't answer a single one. Flowers arrived at her apartment, then at the gallery. Gifts followed, thoughtful, expensive, carefully chosen. Messages filled her voicemail, his voice growing more strained with each one. Apologies blurred into promises. She listened to none of them. Ignoring him felt like the only way to keep herself standing. On the 6th day, Helen appeared. Zion's assistant stepped into the gallery mid-afternoon, her expression serious, eyes scanning the space before settling on Naomi. He's not doing well, she said without preamble. Naomi didn't look up from the sculpture she was adjusting. That's not my responsibility anymore. Helen studied her for a moment. I've worked for Zion for 7 years. I've never seen him like this. He's cancelled everything. Meetings, trips, commitments. Naomi straightened slowly. That doesn't change anything. He loves you, Helen said quietly. Really loves you. Love isn't enough, Naomi replied, the words practiced by now. Maybe not, Helen agreed. But what he's doing now, that might be. Before Naomi could ask what she meant, Helen turned and left, the door closing softly behind her. The answer came that evening. Naomi was doing a final walkthrough before closing when the door chimed. She turned, ready to tell the late visitor they were closed, and froze. Zion stood in the entrance. He looked wrecked, his suit was rumpled. His face unshaven, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion that cut through every trace of polish. Behind him, through the glass, camera flashes burst like lightning. The paparazzi had followed him. What are you doing here? Naomi asked, her voice barely steady. Choosing you, Zion said, loud enough to carry through the gallery. Final, unmistakable. No, he continued, as she stared at him. Let me say this, people were gathering outside now, phones raised, recording. Zion stepped closer, completely unconcerned. I spent 5 days without you, he said, his voice steady despite the chaos, and they were the worst days of my life. Not because I was lonely, but because I finally understood what I'd done. Zion, you need to leave, Naomi whispered. This is turning into a scene. Good, he said. Let it be a scene. He lifted his voice slightly, fully aware of his audience. Let everyone see that Zion Holt finally figured out what actually matters. Her heart hammered. What are you saying? I'm saying I restructured my entire company, he replied. Promoted my partners to equal status. Delegated my major accounts. Cut my board responsibilities in half. He pulled out his phone, showing her emails, confirmations, documents, proof, not promises. I can't stop working, he said, but I can stop letting it run my life. I can make room. For what? She asked softly. For who I love. Tears streamed down her face. You did all of that. In 5 days. I did it in 2, he said. I spent the other 3 terrified you wouldn't give me another chance. He stepped closer, his voice lowering raw. I know I failed you. I know I made you feel invisible and small. I hate myself for that. But I'm here now. Really here. And I'm asking begging you to, let me prove, you come first. How do I know this will last? Naomi whispered. How do I know you won't slip back? You don't, Zion said honestly, taking her hands. And that's terrifying. But I'm willing to earn your trust back day by day, choice by choice. I'm willing to show up. Every time. The cameras are watching, she murmured. Let them, he said. The only opinion I care about is yours. His eyes searched hers desperately. Tell me I'm not too late. Naomi took a breath that shook her chest. If I say yes, things have to change. Really change? Name your terms. Therapy, she said. Together and separately. Done. Regular date nights. No cancellations. Yes, when you're with me, you're present. No disappearing into your phone, I promise. And if I ever feel invisible again, you listen. You don't dismiss it, you don't delay it. Zion's voice thickened. On everything I have, I promise. Naomi exhaled slowly. Then, yes. We can try again. The relief on his face was almost overwhelming. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she might vanish. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for not giving up on me. Don't make me regret it, she said softly. I won't. He kissed her, then slow deep, pouring every ounce of longing and remorse into it. Naomi kissed him back, feeling pieces of herself begin to return, hand in hand. They left the gallery, ignoring the shouted questions and flashing cameras. In the quiet of the car, Zion turned to her. I meant everything I said. I know, Naomi replied, squeezing his hand. I'm choosing to believe you. At his penthouse, he proved it in every touch, every whispered word. He loved her with reverence, with care, with patience, that brought tears to her eyes. Wrapped in his arms afterward, city lights glittering below, Naomi felt something she hadn't felt in weeks: hope. "I talked to Ariana," Zion murmured against her hair. "She told me you'd been thinking about opening your own gallery." Naomi lifted her head. "You did?" "I want to invest," he said. "Not as your boyfriend does, someone who believes in your vision." Emotion caught in her throat. "That's a lot." "It's partnership," Zion replied. "In every way." Naomi nodded, tears slipping free. "Okay. Let's be partners." 3 months later, Naomi stood in her own gallery space, making final adjustments before opening night. Zion arrived with coffee, having cleared his entire afternoon. "Tell me where you need me," he said. "Right here," Naomi replied, pulling him close. "Always right here." "I love you," he said. "I love you too." And as they worked side by side, building something new and honest together, Naomi knew they had both chosen right. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they would walk it together. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The days that followed felt different, not perfect, not effortless, but grounded in something Naomi hadn't felt in a long time: consistency. Zion didn't disappear back into old habits the moment the crisis passed. He showed up when he said he would. Date nights went from tentative plans penciled into his calendar to immovable commitments. When his phone buzzed during dinner, he silenced it without looking. His attention fully on her in a way that felt intentional rather than performative. It wasn't dramatic, but it was meaningful. And Naomi noticed every small shift. They started therapy together, sitting side by side on a neutral couch while a calm, observant woman helped them unpack the ways ambition and love had collided. Zion really listened when Naomi spoke about feeling invisible, about shrinking herself to fit into the margins of his life. He didn't interrupt. He didn't defend. He absorbed it, even when it was uncomfortable. Individually, the work was just as hard. Naomi confronted the parts of herself that had equated patience with self-sacrifice, that had learned to endure instead of demand. Zion faced the truth he'd avoided for years: that success had become his shield, his excuse, his identity. Neither transformation happened overnight, but both were happening honestly and slowly. Trust began to regrow. There were still paparazzi, still curious glances and whispered speculation, but they mattered less now. Zion stopped trying to manage the narrative and focused instead on managing his choices. When business required travel, he talked to Naomi first. When emergencies arose, he explained them without expecting automatic forgiveness. The difference wasn't the absence of conflict, it was the presence of accountability. Naomi kept watching, quietly, carefully. She didn't rush back into certainty. Love was still there, strong and undeniable, but she guarded herself this time. Zion seemed to understand that. He didn't push, he proved. One evening, weeks after their reconciliation, Naomi stood in the empty shell of a space she hoped would soon become her own gallery. Bare walls, concrete floors, possibility humming in the air. Zion walked beside her, hands in his pockets, listening as she talked through her vision: rotating exhibitions, community panels, space for artists who had never been given room to breathe. "This isn't just a gallery," she said, voice full. "It's a statement." Zion nodded. "Then let's make sure it's done right." And he did. He asked questions, offered support without control, invested without overshadowing. For the first time, Naomi felt like she wasn't orbiting someone else's world, she was building her own. With someone walking beside her instead of ahead. Still, doubt crept in on quiet nights. Old patterns left scars. When Zion ran late or meetings stacked unexpectedly, Naomi felt the familiar tightening in her chest. The difference now was that she spoke up. And when she did, Zion listened, adjusted, showed her she wasn't wrong for needing reassurance. "You don't disappear anymore," she said once, surprised by the realization. "I don't want to," he replied simply. "Not from UM's past, marked not by grand gestures but by steady presence. Sunday mornings, cooking together. Late-night conversations without agendas. Zion showing up to gallery meetings, not as a billionaire investor, but as her partner carrying coffee, moving chairs, staying out of the spotlight. On the day Naomi received the keys to her new gallery space, she stood in the doorway with tears in her eyes. Zion wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You did this," he said softly. "We did," she corrected, and for the first time since that impulsive kiss at a bachelorette party had turned her world upside down. Naomi felt something settle deep in her chestnut, the rush of infatuation, not the ache of longing, but a quiet, steady certainty. They weren't chasing love anymore, they were choosing it for a while. Naomi allowed herself to believe the hardest part was behind them. Life settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal, not effortless, but intentional. Zion showed up. He followed through. He kept his word more often than not, and when he didn't, he owned it immediately. Therapy continued. Conversations deepened. Laughter returned in small, unexpected moments that reminded Naomi why she'd fallen for him in the first place. And yet, something still ached. It wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself dramatically. It lived in the quiet spaces, in the moments when Naomi caught herself holding her breath without realizing it. Trust, she was learning, didn't snap back into place just because someone tried harder. It rebuilt slowly, brick by brick. And some cracks took longer to seal. Zion noticed before she said anything. "You're somewhere else," he said one evening, as they sat on her couch, legs tangled, the television murmuring in the background. Naomi hesitated, then sighed. "I don't want to sound ungrateful, say it anyway." She turned to face him. "I'm happy. I am. But I'm still afraid." His jaw tightened, not defensively, but with recognition. "Of me. Of losing myself again," she said quietly. "Of waking up one day and realizing I've adjusted so much that I don't recognize my own life." Zion reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "I don't want that either." "I know," Naomi said, "but knowing doesn't erase what already happened." They sat with that truth between them, heavy but honest. The real test came sooner than Naomi expected. An invitation arrived in the mail, heavy, embossed lettering, elegant and unmistakably elite. A global technology summit in San Francisco. Zion had been invited to give a keynote address. It was the kind of opportunity that once would have consumed him completely. Naomi felt the familiar tightening in her chest as she read it. "I don't want to go," Zion said immediately when he saw her expression. She looked up, surprised. "You don't?" "No," he said. "I want to talk about it. With you." That alone felt like progress. "It's important," Naomi said carefully. "This is your world." "It is," Zion agreed, "but you're my life." The words warmed her and scared her. They talked it through slowly. Zion explained what the summit meant, what attending would require. Naomi admitted what it stirred in her. Memories of waiting, of being sidelined, of feeling invisible. In the end, Zion went, but differently than before. He limited the trip to 2 days instead of a week. He declined private dinners. He scheduled check-ins with Naomi that he didn't cancel. And when he returned, he came straight to her gallery. Suit wrinkled from travel, eyes tired but present. "I missed you," he said simply. Naomi believed him. Still, healing wasn't linear. Some nights, Naomi lay awake replaying old disappointments, wondering if she was foolish for believing change could last. Other nights, Zion woke her from restless sleep just to pull her closer, grounding her in the present. "I'm here," he whispered more than once. "I'm not going anywhere." The words helped, but what mattered more was that he stayed. The real shift came quietly, without cameras or grand declarations. One afternoon, Naomi overheard Zion on the phone in the gallery's back office. "I can't," he said calmly. "I already have plans." There was a pause. "Yes, I know it's urgent." "No, I won't move it." Another pause, longer this time, "because this matters." Naomi stood frozen in the hallway, heart pounding. When Zion hung up and stepped out, he saw her expression and smiled softly. "Date night," he said. "Non-negotiable." Emotion swelled unexpectedly in her chest. That night, as they walked hand in hand through the city, Naomi realized something fundamental had shifted. She wasn't waiting anymore. She wasn't bracing for disappointment. She was living. And for the first time since loving Zion had begun to hurt, Naomi felt herself exhale, fully allowing space for something fragile but real to take root. Hope. This time, didn't feel reckless, it felt earned. Even with the progress, Naomi knew better than to believe love erased history. Trust, she'd learned, wasn't rebuilt through grand speeches or dramatic promises. It was restored through repetition, through ordinary moments handled differently than before. Zion understood that now. He didn't rush her healing or demand reassurance. He let the work speak for itself. Still, the fear hadn't disappeared. It lingered quietly, surfacing when she least expected it. One evening, weeks later, Naomi stood alone in her apartment, scrolling through emails while rain tapped steadily against the windows. Zion was supposed to arrive in an hour. They'd planned dinner, something simple, something normal. She told herself not to check the time again. Not to let old habits resurface. Her phone buzzed. For a split second, her chest tightened. Running 10 minutes late. Wrapping up a call now. I'll be there, promise. She stared at the message, surprised by the rush of relief that followed. 10 minutes wasn't disappearing. 10 minutes came with communication, with certainty. She replied with a simple, okay, then set the phone down and breathed. When Zion arrived, damp from the rain, and slightly out of breath, he didn't launch into excuses. He kissed her cheek, slipped off his coat, and went straight to the kitchen. I brought food, he said. I figured we'd both be tired. They ate at the counter, shoulders brushing, the city humming softly outside. Conversation flowed easily about the gallery, about therapy, about small things that mattered because they were shared. It felt safe. After dinner, Naomi leaned back against the counter and studied him. Can I ask you something? Anything. Why now? She asked. Why were you able to change this time, when you couldn't before? Zion was quiet for a moment. Because losing you showed me something I couldn't see while I still had you, he said honestly. I thought loving someone meant fitting them into my life. I didn't realize it meant reshaping my life around what mattered. Naomi nodded slowly. I was scared that choosing myself meant losing you forever. And I was scared that choosing you meant losing myself, he said. Turns out, we were both wrong. The rain intensified outside, drumming against the glass. Naomi moved closer, resting her head against his chest. His heartbeat was steady beneath her ear. I still need to know something, she said softly. What's that? If this ever starts to slip, Naomi said, choosing her words carefully. If I tell you I'm feeling invisible again, you won't wait for it to become a crisis. You'll listen right then. Zion's arms tightened around her. I will, he said, without hesitation. I won't make you fight to be seen. She believed him not blindly, but consciously. Because belief, she realized, was also a choice. That night, they didn't rush anything. They moved with intention, with patience, rediscovering each other without urgency. Zion touched her like she was something precious, not something he might lose if he didn't hurry. Naomi responded with a softness that surprised her, allowing herself to stay present instead of guarding every feeling. Later, wrapped together in quiet, Naomi stared up at the ceiling, tracing invisible lines with her fingertips. I used to think love was supposed to hurt, she said quietly. That if it didn't ache, it wasn't real. Zion brushed his thumb along her arm. Love isn't supposed to hurt you, he said. It's supposed to hold you. She turned toward him, meeting his eyes. Then I'm staying, she said. Not because I'm afraid to leave, but because I want to be here. Zion smiled, relief and emotion softening his features. That's all I ever wanted. For you to choose, me not out of need, but because you wanted to. Naomi kissed him slowly, deeply, feeling grounded rather than swept away. For the first time since they'd begun, staying didn't feel like a risk, it felt like strength. Choosing to stay didn't mean everything suddenly became easy. What it did mean was that Naomi stopped waiting for the ground to fall out from beneath her feet. Life moved forward, not in dramatic leaps, but in steady, intentional steps that felt earned rather than rushed. Zion didn't retreat back into old patterns, and Naomi didn't silence herself when doubts surfaced. They faced discomfort early now, instead of letting it rot into resentment. The gallery consumed much of Naomi's time as opening day approached. Contractors came and went. Paint samples covered the walls. Lighting was tested, adjusted, tested again. Every decision felt personal because this space wasn't just a business venture, was a declaration. Zion showed up. Without being asked, he brought coffee during early mornings and stayed late when her energy flagged. He listened when she debated layouts, asked thoughtful questions, and never once tried to take control. When investors or industry contacts offered opinions, he made it clear the vision was Naomi's. "This is her world," he said more than once. "I'm just here to support it." Those words mattered more than she expected. Not everyone understood the shift. Articles still circulated, framing Naomi as the woman who had changed Zion Holt. Pundits speculated about timelines and motives. Old acquaintances reached out with thinly veiled curiosity. Naomi learned to ignore the noise. The narrative no longer defined her relationship, her lived experience did. One afternoon, while reviewing final installation plans, Naomi looked up to find Zion watching her from across the room. "What?" she asked, amused. "You're different," he said quietly. She arched a brow. "Different how?" "Stronger," he replied. "Not guarded, just rooted." Naomi considered that. "I think I stopped bending myself to fit." Zion nodded. "I noticed, the night before the gallery's opening, nerves settled heavily in Naomi's chest." She paced the space alone, lights dimmed, art resting quietly on the walls. Doubt whispered, soft but persistent. Was it enough? Was she ready? The door opened behind her. Zion stepped in, closing it gently. "I thought you might be here." "I can't turn my brain off," she admitted. He came to stand beside her, hands loose at his sides. "Then let me say this once, and you don't have to think about it again tonight." She looked at him. "I'm proud of you," Zion said. "Not because you built something beautiful, but because you refused to lose yourself doing it." Emotion tightened her throat. "I didn't do it alone." "No," he agreed. "You didn't, but you led." Opening night arrived in a blur of motion and sound. Guests filled the space, voices overlapping, laughter spilling into the street. Artists beamed beside their work. Naomi moved through it all with a calm she hadn't expected, greeting guests, answering questions, fully present in the moment she had worked so hard to create. Zion stayed just behind her, attentive but unobtrusive. When the crowd finally thinned, Naomi leaned against the counter, exhausted and exhilarated. Zion stepped close, brushing a kiss against her temple. "You did it," he murmured. Naomi smiled, eyes shining. "We did." Later that night, back in the quiet of his penthouse, the city lights stretching endlessly below them, Zion took her hands. "I want to say something," he began. "And I don't want it to sound like a promise made in fear." She waited. "I'm choosing this life," he said. "Not because I had to, but because it's the one I want. With you. With us." Naomi searched his face, seeing no urgency, no desperation, only certainty. "Then we keep choosing each other," she said. "Even when it's uncomfortable." Zion smiled softly. Especially then, as they stood together, wrapped in the glow of the city and the quiet strength of everything they'd rebuilt. Naomi understood something that would have terrified her once. Love wasn't the risk. Any more losing herself was, and this time, she knew she wouldn't. 3 months later, Naomi stood in the center of her new gallery space, hands on her hips, slowly turning in a circle as she took it all in. Sunlight poured through the tall front windows, spilling across polished concrete floors and crisp white walls that now carried purpose instead of possibility. The opening exhibition was nearly ready, every piece placed with intention, every line of sight carefully considered. This space felt different from anything she'd built before. It wasn't just professional, it was personal. She heard footsteps behind her. Zion appeared in the doorway carrying 2 cups of coffee. His sleeves rolled up, jacket nowhere in sight. I cleared my entire afternoon, he said casually, setting one cup beside her. Tell me where you need me. Naomi smiled, warmth spreading through her chest at the ease of it. Right here, she said, tapping the floor beside her. Always right here. He stepped closer, slipping an arm around her waist. You know, he said softly, there was a time I thought success meant building something so big nothing could touch it. And now? Naomi asked. And now I know it means building something that actually lets you live inside it. He replied. She turned to face him, seeing the quiet certainty in his expression. This wasn't the man who once apologized endlessly without changing. This was someone who had done the work consistently, imperfectly, honestly. I love you, Zion said. Without drama or hesitation. Thank you for not walking away when it would have been easier. Naomi rested her forehead against his. Thank you for choosing me without asking me to disappear. They shared a slow, unhurried kiss, unconcerned with the installers moving around them, the world continuing on its own schedule. What mattered was here. Later that evening, after the final adjustments were made and the doors locked, they sat together on the gallery floor, backs against the wall, lights dimmed. The city outside hummed faintly, but inside there was calm. I talked to Ariana again, Zion said quietly. She told me something I didn't know. Naomi lifted her head. What's that? She said you used to talk about opening a space like this years ago, but you were afraid of losing stability. Naomi smiled faintly. I want you to know, Zion continued, my investment here wasn't about control or credit. It was about belief. In you. In your vision. Emotion tightened her chest. That matters. It should, he said simply. We're partners. In all the ways that count. Naomi nodded, the words settling comfortably between them. Partners, not a sacrifice. Not a compromise. A choice. Opening night arrived quietly but powerfully. The gallery filled with voices. With artists seeing their work honored, with collectors listening instead of posturing. Naomi moved through the space with confidence that felt earned rather than borrowed. Zion stayed close, but never ahead. Never in front of the story she was telling. At one point, Naomi caught him watching her not with pride alone, but with respect. When the last guest left, and the doors closed, Naomi exhaled deeply. This, she said, gesturing around them, was worth every hard moment. Zion nodded. So were we. Later, as they stood outside beneath the soft glow of streetlights, Naomi reached for his hand. You know, she said thoughtfully, I used to think choosing love meant losing myself, and now? He asked. And now I know, she said, squeezing his fingers. That real love makes room for you to become more of who you are. Zion smiled, pulling her close. Then we chose right. They walked away together, not toward a perfect future, but toward a shared one built on presence, honesty, and the quiet strength of two people who had learned how to choose each other without letting go of themselves. And for Naomi, that wasn't just enough, it was everything.